Hi everyone, I'm Chrissarandon, and welcome to Cooking by Heart, where we revisit the vivid memories of the food we grew up with and the people and the stories attached to that time in our life. I'd like to welcome those who are listening to the podcast, those who are watching on YouTube, and of course, I got to welcome this incredible full house audience at the Sacred Heart University Community Theatre in beautiful downtown Fairfield, Connecticut. Okay. Our media sponsor for today's event is WSHU Public Radio, the community source for NPR news and classical music. Check them out at WSHU.org to listen live, read their news stories, and find out which radio frequencies to tune into. My guest today is, as you probably know, Lidia Bastianich. Yeah. Lidia is an Emmy Award-winning public television host and best-selling author of 11 cookbooks and 3 children's books, as well as having been awarded numerous honors in the culinary world and being a founder and supporter of philanthropies. Yeah. Too numerous to mention. She is the chef and owner, or has owned, 4 acclaimed New York City restaurants, Lidia, Becco, Esca, and Del Posto. With her daughter Tanya, she has operated Lidia's Pittsburgh and Lidia's Kansas City. Yeah, I'll get there, don't worry. And has operated Becco, Esca, and Del Posto with her son Joe Bastianich and other partners. She opened Idyllic, the amazing artisanal, yes, an extraordinary place. The amazing artisanal Italian food and wine marketplace in New York City, Chicago, Boston, LA, Las Vegas, Toronto, Sao Paulo, Brazil, with son Joe and others. She is also, with her daughter Tanya, co-founder and president of Tavola Productions. I'm very, very proud to present Lidia Bastianich. Welcome.
Hi, Chris.
Good to see you.
Hi.
Thank you. You can see you have a lot of fans out there, Lidia.
Thank you all for coming. That's great.
First of all, I have to tell you that I am personally, I grew up in a restaurant, as I told you when we were sitting backstage, and I'm just in awe of your accomplishments as a chef, as an entrepreneur, and a culinary activist. And we always start the show with provenance, where we're from. And I know that for you, this is a very important place in your life. So tell us a little bit about it. First of all, where were you born?
I was born, Chris, if you look at Italy, in the right-hand corner, there's Venice, then there's Trieste, and then there's a little peninsula, and it's called Istria. Istria is now Croatia. But that was Italy, part into Dalmatia.
Right.
And after World War II, Italy lost the war. The Paris Treaty came down, and Istria went under Yugoslavia, the newly formed communist Yugoslavia.
Right, exactly.
And so I was born right on that cusp. You know, the war ended in 44. By 47, the Paris Treaty in 47, it took about 3 years, the Allied forces and all that guarded that.
Right.
And ultimately, so I was born immediately under communist rule, and it was
and things changed a lot there as you were growing up, right?
They did. Being a child and all that, maybe I didn't realize as much as in retrospect.
Right.
But I recall, we were Italians at home quietly. We spoke Italian, but we couldn't speak Italian outside. We couldn't go to church. There were many kind of limitations. The communists imposed. They wanted their ruling. And, the life, food wasn't all that abundant. And so it was a time.
And didn't they also change the name of cities? They changed
our
everything.
names, like if you see in my book, it's Maticchio, my maiden name.
Right.
Then it became Motica. Bastianich is my married name, but that's too my husband, who's from that area, Bastiani, and then Bastianich. So they did change names, and a lot of things. They wanted to make that part of Yugoslavia, no longer Italy.
Right, and there was also a diaspora there from it. A lot of Italians left, correct?
there was a big exodus between 44 and 47 before the border. There was about 350,000 ethnic Italians that went back into Italy and into the world.
And why? There was a delay with your family. Why?
Well, part of it because, my mother was expecting me and whatever they were. And actually, people waited and said, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Let's see. It's not easy to leave one's home and parents, because ultimately, when the border went down, part of my family also remained in Italy. So we had cousins on the other side. And so my parents would have had to leave their parents behind to go back into Italy. And the business, they were settling, they had a home. And so you think twice about leaving all that behind. But ultimately, in 1956, my parents, I guess, decided, I was about 10 years old, decided that maybe it was time to move on.
But I'd like to go back in time just a little bit, because you talk a lot in this wonderful book, this extraordinary memoir that she's written, by the way, it's going to be available today, about the people in your life who were so important and who became so important to you as you got older and became more and more interested in food, particularly your grandmother.
Yes, Chris. So let me just go back a little to the story. So I was about 10. My parents decided, but we couldn't all leave to go across the border to visit some family.
Right.
So my mother, my brother, and I were given the visa, and we went to visit. My father was held back as a hostage. So we thought, we're visiting, and it was exciting to go on a trip. But once we were there, in about 2 weeks later, my father appeared in the middle of the night. He ran. He escaped through the border, and he was chased, dogs, he was shot at, but he made it. And so now we were all on the Italian side, and that was their plan. So we, as children, we didn't know. So to go back to the food, those formative years, since I was born in 9 and 10, my parents put me and my brother with Grandma and Grandpa, which was a little town outside of Pula now, was the big city. And my grandmother, since food was scarce, she provided food for the whole family, not just for us. So, we had chickens, we had ducks, we had two goats, we had 2 pigs every year. I mean, I milked the goat every morning. We made ricotta when there was extra. November, there was the slaughter. We made sausages. I remember still, as a small girl, mixing blood sausages, because that's the first thing that you make. And the garden, of course, seasonality, having all the different vegetables, whether it's springtime, the peas, the favas. We had the fig trees, we had grape. We even had a plot of wheat. So, we made our own flour. She would harvest the wheat in June, July, and then the kernels she would keep in the cantina and go to the mill only when she needed the flour. So, Chris, I was in a setting completely about food, helping to make food.
Right.
She would send me, go get the rosemary, so big bushes, or go get the bay leaves, go get the potatoes, or whatever. I remember when I harvested, we'd had the potatoes from the ground, She would, because potatoes is a bush plant.
I grow potatoes.
Has roots, and of course the tubers grow on the roots, and she would sort of plow around, pick up the thing, and the big potatoes she would pick, and I was in the back with my little basket to pick up all the small ones. But Chris, taking those potatoes, I still remember it. They were still warm. It's like if they had life. So and then those potatoes, half an hour thereafter, they were being fried or whatever in the olive oil that we made, and so on. So those real flavors are embedded in my mind. So I had the library of those flavors with me.
Embedded in your brain.
As a reference.
From the time you were how old?
I was born until I was 10. Then we were in Trieste. In Trieste, when we ultimately declared that we were refugees because our name had changed and all of that, and we went, they put us in a camp, in a refugee camp.
You were in a refugee camp, right?
Right, for 2 years. and we were waiting for her. But I had an aunt in Trieste who was a good cook, so I started helping her. And so all those flavors kind of were with me. I was put in a nun school through a kind lady, actually, that sponsored me and my brother. And in order to supplement, the nuns put me in the kitchen. I guess I showed food was but at that age, in the kitchen, I was peeling potatoes, whatever I was doing. So somehow I gravitated always towards food. But you know, Chris, the one thing that I specifically, and as I go back into my, you kind of research why do things happen to you? We were not told we were going to leave. So I left my grandmother, my friends, my goat friends, everybody, without saying goodbye. And I felt like I was pulled out of something, and I felt detached. And food was my connector. Cooking the flavors that I remember Grandma cooking, that with my mother, with my aunt, brought me back to a special place with Grandma, reconnected. And henceforth, food was my connector.
Right, and as I recall, you mentioned in the book that working in the big kitchen also trained you in another way.
Well, and working with the nuns, they had the whole school, so it was a big pots. I've never seen such big pots and all that. So slowly I was being trained, not knowing that that's where I was going.
Right. So the restaurant business was sort of lurking in the
And then, of course, when we came ultimately to America in 1958, we spent 2 years in the camp. We were brought here by the Catholic Charities. We had nobody here, so we didn't speak the language or whatever. But once we began, they settled us. And I must say, first we were in New Jersey and then in Astoria. And the Italian communities, the communities in general, were, they accepted us so willingly. They were bringing in chairs and food and everything. And that's where I sort of began to work in kind of in Astoria. I was 14. I needed a little pocket money, immigrants pay or whatever it was. And so there was a bakery right across where I lived. And I was 14, and I remember they didn't hire anybody part-time until you're 16. So I lied. I told them I was 16. I was always a big girl. And they took me, and that was kind of my first official commercial food in the bakery.
This was the Walken Bakery?
Walken's Bakery.
Because, I worked with Chris Walken.
Where did you work
Many
with him?
years ago, here at the Connecticut Shakespeare Festival.
Did you?
And I think he lives somewhere in Connecticut. Yeah.
He lives in Connecticut.
He and I worked together many years ago, at any rate.
We're still friends with him.
Yeah, I know. Just the degrees of separation sometimes are astonishing to me. But also, we're talking about the influences that you accumulated along the way. But your aunt in Trieste was a personal chef, right?
She was. She would cook for families that, paid her for that.
But her cooking was very different from the cooking you were used to from
Well, she was more elegant. Grandma cooked with whatever was seasonal, whatever she found, the eggs we had, the chickens, whatever.
Foraging as well, yes?
We did a lot of foraging, springtime and fall, big foraging times, all the herbs in springtime, wild asparagus, mushrooms. In the fall, again, mushrooms and truffles. In that area, there's a little truffle store.
Ooh.
And so she would get more into the elegant sauces, roasted pheasants, the game, and she taught me. I would go and shop with her. I remember the pheasants hanging, and then we would come home, pluck the plumage. But I used to do that with Grandma with the chickens, so I was okay.
You were used to them.
So I was okay with that, plucking those.
But she was also, and it's something that interests me because I grew up my father was Greek, my mother was Greek, but a lot of the food that Greeks cook are influenced by food from all over that region because there were armies constantly, the Venetians were moving here, the Turks, etc. In fact, when I was growing up, my father's sister would visit us. from Greece, and she would always make something called imambeldi.
What's that?
It is it's a kind of ratatouille. It's very, very Turkish. And the literal translation of it is the imam swooned.
Oh.
Isn't that great?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, wonderful. But you're absolutely right, because that area where we are is multicultural anyway. The Austrian-Hungarians ruled there for a while. The Slavic, so the German. So, you speak more than one language when you're in a situation like that. Certainly we did, although our heritage was Italian. But, she cooked under the Austrian-Hungarians for the Austrian royal family. So that's where she and all this elite cooking. But, in my shows, they see it in my books, I have sarme. Sarme is a Turkish word, and it is the stuffed cabbage.
Yeah.
So they came up the coast to that influence of the Arab world. Absolutely, it's...
We were talking about this backstage, and my wife, who has Russian background, Russian Jewish background, I'm Greek, everybody makes cabbage rolls. Her family, my family, we put avrolemen on it. But in fact, when we go home today, Joanna and I are going to cook Lydia's cabbage rolls.
Good.
Yeah.
Enjoy them. They're good.
Thank you. Anyway, so, but it is, to me, it's very fascinating how all of that cultural interchange, be it forcefully or not, sometimes it was because of war and invasion, and other times it was just because of people moving, and here in a way, we're going to get to that, immigration as well. So you spent time 2 years in that immigration, in the refugee camp. What was the food like there?
Well, the food was they fed us, was filling.
Right.
Usually it was pasta and tomato sauce, and we would get a formaggino, a little piece of cheese, and an apple, or soup. This kind of, that could be made in quantity, and rarely meats and all of that, maybe just as a flavoring agent in the sauce for the pasta. And, we had to go online because there was the mess hall, and we had a little plate. We lived in a it was like a big room, almost like this, and there was different floors, so single men, single women, and then families, and the families were divided in little cubicles, and we had two bunk beds, one for me and my brother, one for my mother, all in the same room. And the room were divided, some of them with plywood, some of them with old boards, some of them with sheets and whatever. So it was, it was...
For 2 years.
2 years. And not only were there immigrants, like the Italians going back to Italy, all of Eastern Europe, communism was really coming, people were escaping Hungary, Poland, whoever could get away. That border where Trieste is, it was kind of the East Europe meets West Europe. And so all kinds of different nationalities, different languages spoken. It was really moving in retrospect when I think, people ask me, Lydia, do you regret those times? Do you have, are you sad, mad about it? And I think about it, and I'm not. I was lucky enough, the outcome has been great, so how can I, it got me to a good place. But all of these passages of my life has made me who I am, has given me a better understanding maybe of people, of human beings, more respect for food, going online as a little child waiting, will you get food or will you not? Yeah. It's kind of puts food in a different perspective.
Does it ever? All right. So from the refugee camp, you are among the lucky few who are allowed to immigrate to America. I know that at the time there were quotas for various countries, and that in Northern European countries generally were given more visas to immigrate, Southern European less, because I've researched this about my father. Mm-hmm. But you folks made it. You got to the United States, Catholic Charities. You were what was the first residence that they put you up in?
It was 1958. Dwight Eisenhower was the president,
Right.
and he opened immigration for refugees, communists, fleeing communism. And we were brought by the Catholic Charities. And I think that the selection of immigrants, because, you kind of look into this one, was that they were looking at young families
Right.
that could contribute. My brother was 4 years older, so the children that could go into the schooling system that can become American.
Right.
My mother was a teacher. My father was a mechanic. He had his own little business that he was incarcerated for that. He had some trucks and all that. And so I think that how they were choosing people was specifically, people with vocation, I guess, which they needed,
Right.
and the potential of the family to grow into being Americans.
Right.
And we were brought by the Catholic Charities, but they put us first in a hotel. Mm-hmm. And it was the Walcott Hotel in Manhattan, 37th Street and 7th Avenue. There was a Horn and Hearted right across, I remember.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
Was my father's first job when he came to America was in a Horn and Hardart.
You're kidding.
Really.
Yeah?
Wash dishes.
There you go.
For something like
6
months a year until he got enough money to go work for a friend.
But we were fascinated by it. Well, how did it work? The Catholic Charities, we were in a hotel. We didn't have a kitchen in a hotel.
Right.
But you would go and visit the social worker, now I know what a social worker is and does. But then this woman who spoke Italian, and she seemed awfully kind because she gave us direction and she gave us money to my mother and father, says, now you feed these children. There's a deli, Italian deli around the corner, there's Horn and Hearted there. And so for about 6 weeks, maybe even 2 months, we did that. And it was fun because, two young kids in Manhattan.
Oh, yeah.
And, first we could only go around the block with my mother, and father. And then because, I was 12, my brother was 15, 16. So, but, I remember looking up that my back would hurt because I was looking up at these buildings.
Right.
And the Empire State Building wasn't too far. Then they ultimately found a little home for us in New Jersey, North Bergen. And they moved us in there, and they sort of handed us over to the local community, the Catholic Charities,
right.
and the Italian-American community. And we were really welcomed. I remember, finally having, it was a small, kind of a little home perched up on the rocks, North Bergen, right across Manhattan. We would see the view. I went back to look for it, but
You'd
now
be
it's big buildings.
paying a lot for that view now. Right.
It certainly would. And the house was divided in two, and there was a Canadian father with 2 children right next to us. So that felt good. We finally had a home.
Right.
We finally felt,
Dirt floor, right?
Yeah, dirt floor. We had dirt floor. The bedrooms had wooden planks, but the kitchen had dirt floor still. Mm. And, kind of took me way back, known as Cantina had.
Right.
But it was, the question was that we had our room, we had our kitchen, we can be as a family, you can close the door.
Right,
and
after 2 years in one room.
Yeah, with everybody else. And the local community was really generous and welcoming, and everybody, we had the knocks on the door continuously bringing us and clothes and food and everything. It was wonderful.
And what was the food like then? You were cooking, obviously.
Well, we had
the family was.
Well, yeah, but it wasn't easy. We used to go all to the supermarket. We were taking, this is it. We used to walk to it, and with the cart. But you didn't understand. You saw the vegetables, I know, and as far as the meats, you saw the meats, and my mother was very economical because, as chicken wings, chicken necks, soup, and a lot of the vegetables. But I remember with the box things, we had a lot of difficulties. We didn't know about cereal. I know cookies. My mother ultimately, we once bought dog cookies. Later, a neighbor came over, and my mother offered them, and she didn't want them. But we ate them.
She sent them out.
They were good. They were okay.
That's great.
The dog looked good. The cookies looked good.
What the hell? Yeah, exactly. And your mother was cooking during this time? They were working as well, right?
Well, they got the job. So my father got a mechanic job. He began with that. And my mother, there was, because the community itself kind of led us. She, of course, she was a teacher, but she couldn't go. So she worked in Evan and Picone. It was a factory where designers' clothes. And
seamstresses?
Seamstresses, but she wasn't specialized. But you know, as a young Italian girl, you knew how to sew.
Right.
And so she worked there. So they did work late, and we would prepare. We went to school in walking distance. It was Sacred Heart School.
Oh yeah.
One of them was here.
Yeah.
And that's how we began our life. And it felt good. I wanted to become American as soon as I could. You know? I wanted to learn the language. I wanted to be like the rest of the kids, you know.
Yeah.
That's what you want to do as a teenager. We found a distant cousin that lived in Astoria.
Right.
And he came to see us. His mother told him that we were here. He had jumped ship, so he wasn't, but he was legal by then. And and he came and brought us to Astoria, and that's when our life continued in Astoria.
Right. And
lots of Greeks in Astoria.
Oh yeah, so the second largest Greek population in the world outside of Greece is in Astoria, Queens. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. At any rate, both your parents were working.
They were.
So then what happened with food, with dinner?
Well, we had, I sort of continued the practice. My mother would plan, when she was home on Saturdays and Sundays.
Right.
And this we're going to do Monday, this Tuesday. And she would
do the meal planning?
She was prepping with me, this is it. But she would, the night before, she says, okay, the beans are soaking, peel 2 potatoes, do this at this time. And so coming home from school, I would begin dinner.
Right.
And then she would finish it when she came. So, I felt comfortable with the pots and the pans at that point.
Right. But then that evolved over time, didn't it? Because I get the impression that you took over more of the cooking.
Well, at home, I wanted to get more into the cooking with her. But, then, because I was going to school too, and I was a teenager, and I wanted to go out a little bit too, make friends. And I used to work at Walk-ins, so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so the weekends.
Right. So you're in school, and the family is settled in this house, and your mom is commuting from.
Well, she was still working in New Jersey. That was the reason why. And so she would come home late.
Right.
6, 7 o'clock. But then I had to have the soup was ready, the minestra was ready, whatever the sauce. So we had things pretty much going by the time she came. And then we ate.
Interesting. I just heard you say minestra.
Minestra.
Which is?
Soup.
Okay.
What's
well, because I was thinking, because when I grew up, orzo was called maniesta with the Greeks. So I thought that's what you were talking about. I was saying another degree of separation. No. Okay. So you're in the house in Astoria, and you are interested in. I get the sense that you were very interested in how things work. In science. I
was interested in science.
And so, did you have ambitions to go to college?
I did. I went. I got a scholarship to Hunter College.
Right.
And science. I wanted science was my interest.
Yeah.
But you worked along the way, first in the bakery, then in restaurants, so always into foods.
Right.
And then I met my husband, who was in the restaurant industry. And I got married 1 year before I finished college. My mother was very mad. Then, my husband was in this industry because he worked in the ships and, as a waiter or captain, and then
Right.
he had come as an immigrant before we did, so he had a position in a good restaurant as a maitre d', and he always wanted to open a restaurant. And that's how we really opened the restaurant. I wasn't a full-fledged chef that said, okay, let's open a restaurant.
What the heck, right.
Yeah, so in 1971, we opened our first little restaurant, and it was like 9 tables. We hired a chef, and he managed the restaurant. And I, of course, also got very much involved. I knew the desserts, some of the food, some of the serving. So we hired an Italian-American chef because the cuisine there...
Very different, though.
Yeah, it was the cuisine of the immigrants.
Right. Explain to the audience, essentially, the difference between when you arrived.
Yeah, I was curious about this cuisine. Now, Italy has 20 regions. And even today, if you go to all 20 regions, Italy is smaller than California, so the regions are not big. But every region has a unique cuisine,
right.
A unique dialect, unique folk songs or whatever. But so when I came here and the Italian-American cuisine, not that we went to the restaurants a lot, but when you went into homes and whatever, it was different. It's based in the Italian culture, you can see, but it was different. So later on, and that was the cuisine that was popular. All the restaurants, we did the research.
Spaghetti and meatballs, lasagna.
Parmigiana, chicken parmigiana, whatever. And not all of this you find in Italy. And when we opened the restaurants that were really busy and full were Italian-American. So we followed suit. We weren't going to be, because even though I knew there was a difference, but that it wasn't the case to do it then, and I wasn't capable of doing that then.
Right.
And so we hired the Italian-American chef. I realized that I needed to learn. I went in the kitchen with him, and for about 10 years, I was his sous chef. I really worked with him. But what I did, Chris, as I kind of got my strength in the kitchen, I began to inserting different dishes, regional, whether it's polenta, whether it's risotto, and all of that. And I think that brought the attention of our customers. They loved it. For me, really, I felt I love cooking, learning, serving. For me, food is a way of, when you offer somebody food, you want well for them. Food is positive.
Yeah.
It's nurturing. And I felt the return of my customers, or whoever, you feed, they're grateful, they feel good, and it's a good exchange.
Absolutely.
A good feeling. Yeah. And so then I continued.
And one of the things that you were doing, which I think is brilliant, by the way, is that you were offering samples of new food to customers free of charge. Try it. See how you like it.
They would eat in this Italian-American, whatever, spaghetti meatball, chicken parmigiana. And most likely of the day, let's say that friends that we had were hunters. They got me a deer. So I would make a guazzetto sauce with deer meat, some polenta. Now, no Italian-American menu has that. Yeah. And I would bring a little tasting around. Do you like it? Do you taste it? And so, you kind of, I did it because I know I loved it and I wanted to share it with them.
Right.
And it worked, and I guess in a way I wanted to teach, and I guess that's what led me into books and television and so on.
Right.
This desire to share also.
Well, and also I think, and this is something that, also that I have such great admiration for, and I think it's probably because I come from immigrant stock as well, and that is that you have a very strong feeling about immigrant food, whatever kind it is, as being important in the culture, in the American way of life.
Well, food is part of who we are. It is our individual culture, whatever ethnicity it is. That food identifies you, Yes, the language, where you were born, the physiology, all of that. But food really reflects who you are, because food is based on the products of the region. The growing of food, depending on the topography, depending on the climate. So wherever you are in this world, there's different vegetation, different fruits, and it really reflects, and of course, the use of spices in hotter sections, the use of spices to preserve the meat, and they're much more than in northern, and that all comes out in cooking. So, excuse me.
That's all right.
So I think that food is such an exemplary kind of profile of who we are as individuals, and in times when maybe we are immigrants or whatever, food is ever more important because food keeps you connected. It keeps your identity, like you keep the language, like you keep. And here I was 12 years old, so I missed my grandma. I missed all of that. I loved where I come from, who I was. But then I loved America. Most of my life I spent in America. So I feel very American. So I felt, I need to unite my because I felt I had two of the best cultures in the world, and I do. Italian and American.
When I was a boy, and there weren't many Greeks in my hometown, and my family we would go off and visit relatives in other towns in West Virginia, where I'm from, and my parents taught me a saying, and they would walk me around. I'd be 5 or 6 years old, and they'd say, "Okay, tell them who you are," and my mantra was, "I'm 100% American and full-blooded Greek."
That's nice.
And they had me repeat that, and it's become so much a part of me my entire life, not wanting to lose that Greek part of me, but at the same time.
But it's a richness. You're that much richer for it.
Absolutely, as is the country.
Exactly. I don't know how many of you saw my special, the Lidia Celebrates America, on the 30th about immigrants.
Yeah. I was going to talk about that. Yeah.
It was amazing how each one of them really identifies and food. Now, for me to do those kind of things, I am not a reporter or whatever, but food. I use food. I get into the comfort because food makes everybody feel comfort. If you put food on the table, whatever, as I said before, it's positive. You want somebody well. And so it was interesting. Go ahead. I didn't want to throw you off track.
Okay. I will talk a little bit more about that, but one of the things I want to do is just trace this kind of the beginnings of your entrepreneurship in the food world and the culinary world in America and Queens and the restaurant, and then you opened another restaurant, right?
Right. So we had this little restaurant. It was busy. We expanded. Also, as an immigrant, when you're given an opportunity, you see the opportunity. You were deprived of a lot of things. You saw how people are deprived. You just go for it. You roll up your sleeve and make it happen.
You introduced one of your chapters in the book by saying life is about taking chances.
Absolutely. But you know what? And I tell when I speak to students, culinary students, I say the one thing is you have to prepare yourself. You have to be ready. You can't just jump in there.
Right.
You have to gain your profession, your strength, your whatever. Then you can grow slowly, But you have to invest in yourself and educate yourself in whatever you want to do.
So the two restaurants in Queens were successful. What made you want to move on and move away from that success to the possibility?
Well,
the unknown.
Manhattan, New York, you belong in New York, people would come, all this different food. They kind of, you see another opportunity of growth, but also a business sense. So we had rented those two places. We were both rented. We had a nice lease still left. And the value was good to sell.
Yeah, right.
So we sold and we leveraged that and we bought in Manhattan. And that's when we opened for Lidia. Now for Lidia, we opened in 1981, which was 10 years after. And that's where I became the chef because with the 10 years with the chef. And also, I went back because, curious, we went back to Italy to visit family, but also I would go back to Italy and work with chefs. I would go in even homes. I was searching homes. I still do that. Yeah, I still do that today. I go different regions of Italy, and
Still learning.
Always, you never stop. You never stop. You never stop. No. It's a curiosity maybe in me. Yeah. But also, I feel, if I'm going to write a book, if I'm going to have a TV show, I need to know what I'm talking about, and I need something new to convey. I need to bring something to the table, because if somebody's going to spend give me half an hour of their time to watch me, they can't just walk away. I need to leave them with something. I need to give them something. And as my profession, I know what to research and how, and I know how to translate it, to transmit it. And so I guess that's the teacher part of me.
How long does it take to prepare a cookbook for publication?
A cookbook takes me 2 years.
For each book?
Yes. So 1 year.
What's the process?
Yeah. 1 year you decide as you're finishing one, you're already thinking about what do you want to convey? What is the message? What is the essence of this book? And then once you have it, you go to all the recipes. Okay, so which recipes? How do you want to format the book? Do you want to format by meals, or by products, and all of that? And then the recipes, the best fit, and you over recipe, and then you eliminate. Then you say, Lydia, are all these your recipes? No, none of them are really mine. Because I'm not an inventor. I feel a conduit of a culture. So I go to Italy, I remember, I see these recipes. Yes, I modify them along the way, because I know I'm bringing them to my American family, and sometimes I know what would work best, or what the real ingredients are, or what they can substitute. So, that transition is where I really can add to the recipe. And then the recipe is, I test it back and forth, and it's all together. Then, of course, comes all the instruction. You have to put all the instruction, and also the prefaces, a little story. Why this recipe? What's special about this recipe?
Yes.
And then the whole, the introduction of the whole book, how sort of that. And then the pictures. The pictures, you have to almost retest all of the recipes, redo the recipes, and take real pictures.
Right.
And then, of course...
Do the visuals affect the recipe at all? That is
sometimes when I redo for the thing, I notice some differences.
Right.
Yeah. So the first year is all getting all this material together, and the second year, when you give the material to the publisher, is pulling together the book. So you have to act also as an editor. There's pictures.
Right.
Make check that they've told the right thing or changed the right way or whatever. So, and then the design of the book too. I get involved in the design of the book too.
Yeah.
So what is the front page? What is the last page? What is the message? What's the coloring of the all of that? Until that's 2 years by the time I'm finished. But every book gives me 2 years of television shows. I do 26 half-an-hour shows for television, and so.
And you follow the book. The book, that particular book?
Yeah, because it's also convenient for the viewers.
Right.
They see me make it. They can get the book, and they can ultimately make all that better. But yes, I just finished in May, the 26 episodes that are going to air in October, and the new book is going to come out in October. So usually PBS does 26, and then they repeat it, so it's 52 weeks a year, and then the other half is for the next year. In the meantime, I'm working on the other book.
Right.
So
it's an arduous process, but an interesting one, obviously.
Yes, it is. I enjoy it.
Your children have followed you in the business. Was that the intention when you first started out?
No. My son was, I think, 4 years old when we opened the restaurant, and then at the first year I got pregnant with my daughter, so things get always more complicated, but you work at them. and so I lived my parents lived with me, so that helped everything. I could go back to work, the kids were at home, but they would come to the restaurant, eat dinner, do part of their homework, and then go home with grandma while we worked the rest of the night. And as they grew up and teenagers, in restaurants, they liked, it's fun. There's people were smoking at the time, drinking at the bar, all the things. So I always used to tell them, this is not what you want to do, this business. We came to America. Grandma really sacrificed to bring us to America. You need to get an American education and an American job. So I didn't know what that was, but we really emphasized. We didn't want them to come into that industry. And my son, ultimately business masters, Wall Street, and then he decided. My daughter, Georgetown, Oxford, PhD, Renaissance art history. They're running the business now.
And at one point, you got some very good advice from a pediatrician because you were worried about work.
I get asked a lot because our industry is notorious as far as women in the industry. So I see these young women, and I know that I love my industry. I had a great time. Was it difficult? Yes, at times. But, life is, you come your hurdles and you have to overcome them.
Yeah.
And so when I had my daughter, and we were 1 year and something into the business, and, we had a big loan, and, things were and all that. So I stayed home, I think, 2 months. And then I was itching. I said, I need, the loans, I need to go back to work, but I don't want to leave my daughter and all that. And at that time, no psychiatrist. We didn't have any psychiatrists.
Yeah.
So today you go.
It can be done.
Today everything is a psychiatrist. I'm sorry if there's a psychiatrist there. But I went to the pediatrician,
Yeah.
And so I said, listen, I'm torn, I have this beautiful child. My maternal instincts are really, and then I know that there's a big loan to be paid. My husband and I decided we were going to do this together. I was going to help him. And he was a very wise man. And he told me, Lidia, children love happy parents. And he said, remember, Lidia, children come into a family. A family shouldn't change because children come to meet them. Children come into a family.
Right.
I said, you do because you need to be happy. And you're going to be happy if you're finishing working, and you can take care of your children.
Yeah.
Give them all the love that you can when you can, and get them involved. Keep them with you as much as you could. And so we did. We went at the restaurants, they would come. If we went to Europe, we would go to visit family, but we would go on research. The kids came along with us on research. So it was vacation, research, and whatever. And I insisted they go to school and they do their thing.
Yeah.
But it got into them. I guess I infected them with this, with this disease.
Yes, I must say, when I was growing up, I worked in my dad's restaurant from the time I was 10 until I left for college. And the last thing I wanted to do was be in the restaurant business. I saw how hard he worked, how difficult it was. He brought the whole family over, the unique sort of ubiquitous immigrant story. And yet, because my mother was great in terms of involving me in the kitchen. She would do things like, if we were preparing a meal, she would say, okay, now we're not going to talk, we're going to sing. I'm going to sing the instructions to you, and you have to sing back to me, whatever it was like improvisation. I mean, it's probably why I became an actor. So she made it fun. And when my kids were growing up, we involved them in the cooking. My son ended up going to the French Culinary Institute, becoming a line cook, and ultimately left because he wasn't making enough money and the work was just, what it's like. But my daughters cook, they're wonderful cooks, and we talk about food all the time. It's part of what brings us together.
Yeah, food is a binding. You know what's wonderful now? I've been on public television 25 years. 50 years in the restaurant industry, if you counting the years, and 25 years on public television. And ever more, you know, because, and for me, it was a natural, just like you said. My mother lived there, the kids were there to bring them in. You know, I did, the television was like regular family happening. So they became part, people followed them. I still include them now, and they come from college, wherever they are, to make their cameo appearance, if you will. They love it. They love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They love cooking. And, but I get these emails because, you know, we did a lot of family, you know, Lydia, the family getting together at the table and cooking and all of that. And I think that, you know, maybe industrialization or whatever has sort of scattered a little bit the families in America, but it's so important to that time together with food.
Absolutely. And I wanted to get back a little bit to the fact that you were and are a high-powered woman chef. You also are very involved in organizations that encourage women to become chefs. How does that manifest itself in your life?
Well, you know, our industry is a unique industry. It's a tough industry, and it's a rewarding industry. It's an industry that you can have a lot of fun and have a lot of work, but also it offers you opportunities to enter different aspects of life and kind of be creative and do a lot of good also. Whether it be, I mean, you know, what I do now, I do an awful lot of events to fundraise, to benefit, and I'll list some. But as far as women, I noticed that very early of these difficulties with women. And 20-somewhat years ago, I was one of the founders of Women Chefs and Restaurateurs. And it's an organization that is still existent, quite a few thousand of members. And they were all women chefs from the West Coast, that Barbara Lazaroff, Susan Milliken, and this was because, and it wasn't an association because I felt, you know, this association of sitting down and complaining to each other. Or It was more, for me, it was more, you know, when you're really in charge, you own or you really conduct the business. And so it's important. I realized that very soon, and I tell that my children and all. I said, you know, I knew I wanted to do a lot of things, good and business and whatever, and I knew I couldn't do it without a platform.
Yeah.
I needed a platform of success, because if you have a platform of success, then people kind of say, oh, okay, let me listen.
The platform being the restaurant?
The restaurant, the success, all of that.
Yeah.
And so I felt, you know, women need to feel that they can own a restaurant and be good in business and succeed. And at that time, what I felt, I had my husband, but when we went to open for Lydia, we had difficulties because we unexpected expenses.
Yeah, right.
And we almost couldn't open because of underpinning the building or whatever. And my husband wasn't feeling too good, and so I went to the bank or whatever. They wouldn't listen to me unless I brought my husband.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. So this organization, what we focused was on introducing female chefs to financial institutions, whether it was American Express, the Chase Manhattan, and whatever. So that goal, and I think they still keep on going on that goal, and it's important, you know, absolutely. Then, you know, I did at the United Nations, UNIFEM, United Nations female organization, who I did years of fundraising for them, and that's for actually women in third world countries. And it was a great, now it's under the auspices of a mega organization at the UN, but at that time, UNIFEM, what they had microloans for women in third world countries. Let's say that you're a seamstress, and a lot of these women in third world countries are single parent, you know, with children. And sew by hand, one dress a week, maybe if you make it, and, you know, and these microloans would let them buy a little sewing machine or something.
There's a wonderful organization called Finca that does that as well.
I think one is offshoot of the other.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that gave me great satisfaction that I was, you know, in some way.
On a micro level.
On a micro level, that you get this woman. So what I feel that how I can contribute is maybe not directly go to these places, but organize or be part of getting people that care together that will ultimately support and donate a cause.
Yes.
And that I can do, and I do it continuously.
Good for you. Now, I have one final question that I always ask my guests. If there's one moment in your young life that brings you back to that time, that has to do with food, if it's a smell, if it's a moment, if it's a person, what would that moment be? That one that just suddenly you go, I'm back at Bucellera, I'm back at Trieste, I'm back at San Saba.
You know, your senses, and one of the strongest senses in recall is your olfactory, your smell. And that is, it has a physiological reason, because as animals, prehistoric, and then we evolved into, we were foragers. Yeah. And the sense of smell was really necessary to find the right berries, the right thing, whatever. So a big part of our brain was dedicated to the olfactory. And in the time of evolution, not much time has passed.
Right.
So we still have...
It's a second in human history. Yeah.
Still, the olfactory is a great receptor for us. And it stores a lot of things. It's like library. So inevitably, when I smell, and I remember, I love apricots, but I remember my grandmother had 2 apricot trees, and they didn't produce fruit every year, every second year. And I would go and look. And so these little apricots, the color of this bright orange, and when they had speckles, they had little speckles, I knew they were perfect. So when I bite into an apricot and comes close to that, it takes
you right back.
Straight back.
Well. Lydia?
Are we finished?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
For taking us on this wonderful culinary journey of your life and the history of your family. It's been a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. Put the light on so I can see them.
House lights.
House lights.
House lights up. Can you bring the house lights up?
I want to see them.
Lydia wants to see you.
Oh, okay. Hi. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.